Hey, Hung, how you
How's
doing?
it how's it going, Matt? Good to see you, dude.
Yeah, good to see you. I like your background. I like your background. You got is that some sort of neon light you've got in the background there?
It is. You know what? I bought this in AliExpress in order to just brighten the thing up because I realized that I was so boring in the background, Matt. I mean, I'm boring in the front ground anyway, but I need, you know what I mean? So
You're
got to
not
give
at
the
all.
crowd,
You're not at all.
got
Yeah,
to give the crowd something. So
yeah.
hence I whacked that up. So hopefully gives a bit of cheer to people.
My little sign at the back actually says on air as well, but it just kind of clashes with the camera, so it just looks like this weird green, weird green thing. Well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to talk to you. Just to start off with, for people watching who may not know who you are, and I'm sure there can't be very many, but there might be some. Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, no worries. Hey everybody, my name's Hung Lee. I still self-identify as a recruiter, even though it has been probably a decade plus before since I recruited someone in properly. But I've worked in recruiting for 20 years, agency side 10 years, in-house for 5 years. A lot of startup recruiting. Launched my own tech startup, which didn't work. But that that burned 3 years of my life. But from that, sort of recruiting brain food emerged, which is basically a newsletter, a live stream, an online community. And I guess these days I kind of curate and manage that. So yeah, I'm a person that sees myself as a recruiter and wants to help recruiters. And the way I do that is to, hopefully provide good information and clear out sort of spaces where people can have a good chat.
No, absolutely, and it's such an important job these days because there is so much information out there. I think anything that really helps people, get that signal and all that noise is such a crucial thing. I suppose on that note that you're in a unique position that it's basically your job to spend the week crawling through all of the information that's out there to try and, to curate stuff that's kind of really going to help recruiters and TA professionals and everyone move the kind of profession forward. So, you've probably seen a lot this year in terms of, thoughts and facts and all that sort of stuff. So, tell us about 2024. We've got about 2 weeks left. What have you seen? What are the big trends? What's sort of really cut through the noise this year?
It's interesting you asked the question because I'm actually in this I'm in the middle of writing this what happened in 2024 series. So I've whacked out like 15 things so far. I've got five more to get out there to make 20. And yeah, everyone who's directly experienced it, it's obviously been another challenging year. Very, very difficult in industry. People in work, everyone is saying they're massively overstressed, overburdened with work. We know that TA teams in particular have been pared back. I saw a McKinsey post actually today, which kind of revealed that the HR functions have disproportionately borne the burden of cutbacks, basically, from most corporates, and that's where a lot of the cost savings have gone. So our entire sort of industry has really had that sort of another year of. So very, very tough. Big trends, I think. This is the year where we've lost the naive optimism. I think there's a few people who were hanging on to that at the start of this year. Thought, right, the year is going to turn. Not really. It's not that sort of situation. I think we're beginning to realize that what we're seeing is not just a matter of cycles, but really a seismic shift in terms of how technology is interfacing with society. That's going to transform the way in which we work, and we're kind of subject to that transformation. Our challenge is to actually take possession of it, and stop being such a subject and being an actor on it and influence it going forward. So that's the big message I've got to try and communicate to the community for 2025.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think it's these are long term trends, and it hasn't even got started yet. And how's it going to end? And I think that whole thing about people stepping up, taking responsibility, helping to shape this is kind of critical, isn't it? And do you think that message is getting across? Do you see people trying to step up, take control, shape the future?
It's hard, mate. And I don't want to condemn anybody for not doing it. And I think that the two trends that we just talked about just now are kind of feed into each other. If we're over capacity, if everyone's running at 120%, guess what? You haven't got any percent to do the new stuff. And so we've been like on the business as usual, which is just mega overstressed, working all hours of the week to try and get things done. And we've not been able to create the capacity to do the experimentation. Now, the reality is, whenever you change any process, classic change management, there's going to be a downturn of your efficiency as you make that shift. It's a true for any. It's like learning to swim. You're great at the front crawl. That's brilliant. If you want to learn the backstroke, guess what? You're going to go slower as you learn how to do the backstroke. And you've got to give yourself the bandwidth to do it. So that's been really tough for us. I think it won't get any easier in 2025, but we have to grasp the nettle, which basically means having a strong negotiation with the business, even though we feel as if right now, institutionally, I think HR and TA are probably as low in confidence and morale as we've been for some years. We've somehow got to find it within ourselves to go back to the business and say, yes, we can make you more efficient. We can do all of these things, but here's what I need to get there. And create the bandwidth to say, right, we have to just run a bunch of experiments such that we can test whether some of these techniques, technologies actually work.
No, absolutely. I think that's yeah. I mean, that's certainly a kind of a massive challenge in terms of shifting this, and it's almost like the overarching narrative is there. We've got AI. We can be more efficient. We can do all these kind of things, and that's very much coming down from the top of the business. Going back to McKinsey, start of the year, they kind of released this big report about this is the year of productivity because productivity is a way that businesses can drive value and create revenue in the kind of economy that we've got. But it's kind of like you have to sort of work out how that works within a business, don't you? And it's kind of just folding that down through the business and working out what it means for the individual parts. And that seems to be where we are and where the challenge is. Another question that in your kind of review of 2024, which I think I read one of your articles this afternoon actually about that. What's the thing that surprised you the most?
I thought we'd use programmatic advertising more. one of my predictions. I looked at my. I also do a forecast post, which I do basically at either the very beginning of the year or the very fag end of the year at the end. And I look, and it's again 20 predictions. You know what, Matt? I got every single one of them completely wrong. It's like way off on everything. And one of the ones I thought we would make more use of was programmatic, because I kind of anticipated that the job applicant flood will continue to accelerate given the economic conditions. We've got more motivated job seekers. We've also got greater use of AI that's going to, increase the applicant rate per candidate, so to say. So I thought, what, that's going to increase. And I anticipated that the employer response would be to use basically some smart advertising so that you could take down a job if you hit a number, rather than put a duration-based ad on there and just suck in all of these impossible to process candidates. Turns out that hasn't happened. What has happened is that companies simply stopped posting any jobs. So they thought, right, we're not going to bother. So
Yeah.
programmatic hasn't really increased, in my opinion, even though certain sort of individual vendors will say, yes, we've increased here or there, but on aggregate, I don't think that's significantly increased. We haven't seen huge adoption in the UK or EU compared to the US. So yeah, that surprised me, but you know what? It doesn't surprise me that I get things wrong, Matt. So maybe
Well,
I
I
shouldn't
think
be surprised.
I think that is a very sound prediction. I think it's just the timescale on it, because I think that there is I think there's an inevitability about some of these things, just because that's how marketing works, and that's where these things go eventually. And I think you're right there is a split between the US and the UK and Europe when it comes to programmatic adoption, which is surprising, not surprising, but it's quite interesting. So I think that's a great prediction. It's just the obviously a different different time scale. I want to talk a little bit about next year. Before we do though, let's talk about a kind of an undefined time in the future. So look forward a little bit. The day that this kind of all sort of plays out a little bit more and reforms itself, what do you think talent acquisition is going to look like in the, I was going to say the post AI world, but when we're kind of properly into the AI world, if we're having this conversation in 5 years' time, 3 years' time, 2 years' time, what do you think talent acquisition looks like?
I think it won't be called talent acquisition. I think the name's got to go, because that's really and we've changed names before, right? I mean, HR used to be personnel,
Yeah.
personnel then went into HR, recruitment used to be, then turned into talent acquisition. Talent acquisition will go. Reason why is simply because the idea of acquiring talent, meaning permanent full-time employees, that's going to continue to shrink as a demand. So companies, in terms of overall size, in my opinion, we've already hit peak organizational size. That was probably the overhiring era just after the pandemic sort of lockdowns were over, where all of these tech companies were charging out and hiring tens of thousands of people. Amazon's never going to get more people. Meta is never going to hire more people than that period. So there's going to be successive downsizing as companies go and become more efficient. Therefore, it's actually important for us in TA to recognize that that's the direction of travel. And it's a strategic mistake for us to hang on to that sort of label, and also hang on to the parameters that label gives us. We've needed for a long time to expand our scope. The scope expansion needs to include anybody, any worker, regardless of contractual relationships with the organization. We need to be in charge of that entire talent universe. How are you able to deliver the skills and capacity that the business needs on demand? That's what we need
Mm,
to be doing.
mm,
So I
mm.
think if we're locked into this mindset of talent acquisition, number one, words matter. It changes our parameters, it changes our thinking, and it constrains our thinking. And number two, it actually changes how other people think of us. When people
Yeah.
look at a
Yeah.
spreadsheet and say,
Mm.
"Oh, there's talent acquisition," or "There's a person that manages the gig economy," or "There's a person that manages contingent workforce," guess what? We're going to scrunch down TA. That means crunch down for
Mm.
FTEs. TA can go. So we need to expand scope and rename, and basically understand that our function isn't just growing companies in terms of headcount; it's increasing business capacity. That's what we really do. We
Absolutely.
provide
Yeah.
companies with capacity. So whether that's a full-time worker, great. Gig platform, great. Interim person, amazing. Maybe it's an automated worker.
I was going to
Maybe it's a
say
robot,
exactly that.
right?
Robot, AI, all that kind of stuff.
Why?
Yeah, I think
Why
that
any?
makes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense, and just interesting to see some of those conversations sort of starting. Starting kind of now, and then just 1 minute. I know you're probably writing loads of predictions for next year, and I don't want to steal your thunder if you're going to publish them. But just give us a quick idea about what you think is going to happen in 2025.
Oh my God, I got 60 seconds. I should have really prepped for this. And there's no thunder to steal. But one thing which I think is quite an uncomfortable scenario, but let's talk about it. I think there'll be a divergence between the US and basically UK, EU when it comes down to the conversation on DE&I. I do believe that Trump 2.0 is going to be really bad for diversity and inclusion. It's going to be pretty bad for HR, to be honest with you. And I do believe that basically the conversation will split. I think the UK and EU, most of this is settled stuff. We're not going to reverse any. I think I heard you before talking about pay transparency, for instance, gender representation on board level. That's already in the legislation over this side of the Atlantic. That's going to continue as is. I do think basically the UK and EU will continue to be fairly progressive when it comes to DE&I. However, I think our friends in the US are going to have a battle on their hands on that. So there'll be basically a split. We'll have different conversations, and it's going to be tough for our US colleagues. But hopefully they can count on our support on these trying moments, shall we say?